Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 6 of Artist Overviews. Today we'll be covering Ella Fitzgerald. Now, a quick note before we get into this. I'd like to once again apologize for the long break between uploading videos. Obviously, like I always say with older jazz artists, they have really big catalogs usually, so it could take a while to listen through those and take notes and research and all that. So I appreciate you guys still supporting me throughout that absence. Even though I have been posting shorts, which you're welcome to check out. I do spend a lot of my time taking notes and kind of putting out those shorts as like little updates to let you guys know I'm still alive. So if you like those, I don't know, make sure to like them. Also, I'd like to say that along with all the artist overviews, this one will have a playlist that I will attach the link to in the description. It will be on Spotify, and it will be my favorite songs throughout the discography. It's really big, really good. I recommend checking it out. I'm sure you'll find something you like if you like Ella Fitzgerald. And if you don't, I'm even sure you probably will too. And the last thing I want to say is I've gotten some comments on some of the shorts saying that they would like me to cover non-jazz artists, or maybe they think I wouldn't, or they're wondering if I would. I just like to clarify that I do intend to cover many artists of many genres. The way I'm just doing this series kind of, I guess, formats it so we start earlier in time from popular music and albums. So that would be like the 50s as we were starting in now. And oftentimes jazz was the dominant genre there, and most of the artists of that time were jazz artists. But as we get further in the series, you'll start to see more genres and more diversity, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy that. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Ella Fitzgerald was born on April 25th, 1917, in Newport, Virginia, USA. Due to Ella's parents' lack of romantical compatibility, she and her mom moved to Yonkers, New York. Growing up, she was primarily influenced by Louis Armstrong, Bing Crosby, and the Boswell sisters. And in 1932, when Ella was 15, her mother died in a car accident, so her stepfather took care of her from then on. Unfortunately, there's some writings saying that Ella's stepfather, Joseph De Silva, was abusing her from a young age. And around this time, she also began skipping school and her grades slipped because of this. She began working as a lookout for a mafia-tied bordello, and she eventually got caught for this and was sent to the Colored Orphan Asylum in Riverdale. The orphanage then got too crowded, so she was transferred to the New York Training School for Girls. Of her character, she was described as notoriously shy, and she kept to herself a lot, which makes sense because of her troubled backstory. Ella debuted at the age of 17 in 1934 at the Apollo Theater. She intended to perform a dance, but due to other acts of impressive dance performances, she opted to sing instead. Thankfully, this kickstarted one of her greatest traits, and obviously what she's known for, her beautiful voice. Even though she was a good dancer too. And in 1935, she performed with Tiny Bradshaw for a week at the Harlem Opera House. And later that year, Chick Webb played with Ella at Yale, and together they would play at Harlem Savoy ballrooms. Webb died from spinal tuberculosis in 1939, and Ella was then promoted to bandleader of her group. In 1942, with a rising discordance within her band, she began working as the lead singer of the Three Keys, and Norman Granz, the famous producer, became her manager in the mid-40s. The shifts in popular music were responsible to Ella's stylistic changes, and she took a lot of inspiration from playing with Dizzy Gillespie. It was recorded that the way she styled her singing was actually based on Dizzy Gillespie's trumpet playing, and she would try and hit the notes that he was hitting on the trumpet and kind of mimic those, which I think later kind of manufactured into her scat singing style that she pioneered. Now, we set the stage for her albums, but before we get into that, I should just mention I will also be recommending 3 songs from each album that I think you should check out. based on if you're interested. And I'll also let you know for the albums I think that you should definitely check out and that are absolutely must listens for her discography. To start, in 1950, Ella Fitzgerald released her first album, Ella Sings Gershwin. On this album, she was accompanied by Ellis Larkins, and it was released on the Decca label. She came out of the gate swinging on this project, with her legendary vocals. Ellis also does a phenomenal job on piano, even if it gets slightly repetitive towards the back half. On this album, I'd recommend Someone to Watch Over Me, My One and Only, and Looking for a Boy. 4 years later, she released her second album, in 1954, Songs in a Mellow Mood. Her second studio release was also done with the help of Ellis Larkins, and it's also good, but it has more stark isolation of Ella's vocals, and I think it serves the song slightly less than when it didn't, especially considering the murkier recording quality of the time. This was also her first album after her divorce with double bass player Roy Brown. And the 3 songs I recommend from this album are Making Whoopee, Nice Work If You Can Get It, and What Is There to Say. You could really see it carrying the tones of sadness, of grief, of perhaps just frustration, and all those things that come with a broken relationship. In the following year, she released her third album, Songs from P. Kelly's Blues, in 1955. Ella is incredible on this, with impressive performances strewn throughout. Peggy Lee was nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Academy Awards, which is what this was for. I think it was somewhat of a soundtrack album, somewhat. And there's very good piano featured on this project, too. I recommend the 3 songs of Sugar, That Sugar Baby of Mine, Ella Hums the Blues, and Hard-Hearted Hannah. Next year, we see her first project featuring the help of Norman, as well as her creation of Verve Records, with Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Cole Porter Songbook, released in 1956. This was Ella's first installment in her legendary Songbook series, and her first double album covering the songs of Cole Porter. It was also her first release on Verve Records, and the first album to be released by a label, like I said. The album was brought to and played for Cole Porter, who complimented the diction of the album. It was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2000, and it was also added to the Library of Congress. And in 2000, it was voted number 490 in Colin Larkin's Top 1000 Albums. Ella does some superb vocal work here, pulling on a masterclass of vocal performances even if her voice doesn't lend the best to swing. It does run somewhat long, but it doesn't get repetitive. And on this album, I'd recommend Anything Goes, I Get a Kick Out of You, and Always True to My Fashion. Within the same year, Ella released her first major collaboration album with Louis Armstrong, one of the biggest figures of jazz and pop at the time. Obviously, I've covered him before. Check out the past episode, 5, of Artist Overviews, where I also talk about this album. This was the first of their trilogy of collaborations, and Norman Granz handpicked 11 tracks for the pair to record. The album received favorable reviews, yet few perfect reviews, with some critics deeming the duo not entirely compatible. In 2000, it was voted number 636 in Colin Larkin's Top 1000 Albums, and Bjork cited the work as one of her favorite albums. In my opinion, the front half is flawless and jazz perfection, while the second half stretches out and brings down the quality of the album somewhat, though The Nearness of You is a fantastic song. The 3 songs I'd recommend from this album are Can't We Be Friends, Isn't This a Lovely Day, and Moonlight in Vermont. Within that same year, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Rodgers and Hart Songbook in 1956. This album is a compilation of covers of songs composed by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart. the second release in her Songbook series. It was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1999, and in 2000 it was voted number 642 in Colin Larkin's Top 1000 Albums, which I believe pulls away from many of her strengths. To be honest, I think about 85% of this album is kind of run on. And the 3 tracks I'd recommend from it are Wait Till You See Her, Here in My Arms, and Dancing on the Ceiling. The next album is Ella and Louie Again, released in 1957. This was Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong's second collaboration album, and the first to feature several solo tracks. The Oscar Peterson trio also returns to do backing instrumentals. The album performed favorably with critics, but received many complaints about Armstrong's lack of trumpet. It's definitely a larger piece and longer piece, and the arbitrary nature of the pair songs done together versus individually makes an inconsistent listen. And even though there are many great songs on here, it still partly feels like a compilation of leftovers. The 3 tracks I recommend from this record are Don't Be That Way, Autumn in New York, and Learning the Blues. Around this time, there were also reports that Ella secretly married a man named Thor in Oslo, Norway, and they actually bought an apartment together, though the relationship was short-lived. However, very intense despite that. In the following year, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Duke Ellington Songbook in 1957. Check out episode 4, Duke Ellington discography. You will also see this in there. Anyways, this was the 3rd installment in Ella's Songbook series in her collaboration with legendary artist Duke Ellington. It's the only songbook recording where the composer being covered is featured on the album. This was also the release that helped her prominently exhibit her scat singing talent. Ella's performance on this album won her a Grammy Award. It also sparked a few more collaborations between the pair, while being a lengthy listen. It plays really well, and the first 3 sides are jazz perfection, in my opinion. One of the best albums of all time, hands down. The 3 songs I recommend are Drop Me Off in Harlem, Daydream, and Caravan. In the same year of 1957, Ella Fitzgerald released Like Someone in Love. This album was arranged and conducted by Frank DeVol. The album features songs composed by some of her songbook artists and features jazz legend Stan Getz on first tracks. The album received favorable reviews, and it also has an interesting track list in a thematic sense. The first half is more about the slower, positive love songs, while the second is more brash and loud regarding the struggles of love. It makes for an interesting listen throughout. The 3 tracks I'd recommend are Your Blaze, Night Wind, and Hurry Home. Within that same year, she released another collaboration album, with 1 O'Clock Jump in 1957. This album is another legendary jazz collaboration, this time featuring Count Basie and Joe Williams. Ernie Wilkins was tasked with conducting the record, and critics responded negatively to this release, being generally underwhelmed with the final product. I somewhat feel the same, as I believe Ella was significantly underutilized on this record, appearing only on 1 track. While Williams' vocals definitely work on some tracks better than others, though all 3 artists probably could have done more given their standards. The 3 tracks I'd recommend are I Don't Like You No More, Amazing Love, and Smack Dab in the Middle. 2 years later, in 1959, Ella Fitzgerald released Porgy and Bess with Louis Armstrong. This was the 3rd and final release of the pair, and the suite is adapted from the eponymous opera. The arrangements are done by Russell Garcia, and only 5 tracks feature the pair together. The cover art was designed by Joseph Young, and it won a Grammy in 2001. The album was received well by critics, and I thought it was pretty good, and the second strongest amongst their trilogy of releases. I also wish, though, that they would have done every song together. Regardless, it's still a jazz standard and still worth a while listening to. The 3 songs I recommend are Summertime, Buzzard Song, Here Comes the Honeyman, Crabman, Odags, and So Fresh and Fine. In 1958, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Swings Lightly. This album was recorded alongside Marty Patch and was their first of their collaborative albums. It won the 1960 Grammy for Best Improvised Jazz Solo. This album is really cool. It almost has a proto-soul feel to it, which is super progressive for the time. And the lows on this album are super bland, but it still is pretty decent overall. The 3 tracks I recommend from this one are What's Your Story, Morning Glory, Knock Me a Kiss, and 720 in the Books. Within the same year of 1958, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Irving Berlin Songbook. Another installment in the Songbook series, this record was conducted and arranged by Paul Weston. It was nominated for Album of the Year and won the Grammy for Best Vocal Performance, Female. Critics adored the album and deemed it essential in her Songbook series. Unpopularly, I am not the biggest fan of it, and I think almost all of Ella's beautiful vocal techniques and tricks are exhausted due to the long nature of the album's runtime. I still think that there's a lot of great stuff here, though, and I'd recommend Alexander's Ragtime Band, Heatwave, and Let Yourself Go. In 1959, Ella Fitzgerald next released Ella Fitzgerald Sings Sweet Songs for Swingers. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. Sorry. This album was arranged and conducted again by Frank DeVol, and on this record, Ella tried covering songs from smaller artists to appease her more grandeur songbook albums. It was received favorably by critics, and the production is really tight on this album, and the short song runtimes make it a fluid listen. It doesn't feature Ella's strongest vocals, but it's still quite good overall. The 3 tracks I'd recommend from this record are Out of This World, Lullaby of Broadway, and Sweet and Lovely. In the same year of 1959, Ella Fitzgerald released Get Happy. This album features a legendary Nelson Riddle, along with a few of her usual aforementioned producers. This album was thought of as good but not essential by critics. I really enjoy the fast pace on this. It makes the listen more lively, especially with the dynamic instrumentals. The 3 tracks I'd recommend are Beat Me, Daddy, 8 to the Bar, Like Young, and Blue Skies. In the same year, she released Hello Love in 1959. This album focused on covering popular songs not covered by her songbook series. It kicks off with a bang of strong tracks, and the instrumentals also sound great throughout this. The 3 tracks I'd recommend for this are You Go to My Head, Willow Weep for Me, and Will Be a Little Late This Year. Ella's first album, released in the 1960s, is Ella Wishes You a Swinging Christmas, released in 1960. Her first album in the 60s was arranged and conducted by Frank DeVol. It's Ella's only full Christmas release for Verve Records, and Ella's vocals are as transcendent on this record. I wish there was more instrumental deviation from the classic Christmas standards, but it's still very good and considered classic by many. I got some hate for giving this a low rating because it doesn't really deviate from a lot of the Christmas standards very much. The 3 tracks I recommend on this are Good Morning Blues, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, and Sleigh Ride. Around this time, too, Ella actually started a new relationship, this time with somebody in Denmark. It was once again short-lived, lasting only a year, but she actually moved there for 3 months and even considered buying a jazz club. However, by 1963, she sold the house that she bought there. In the same year of 1960, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Fitzgerald sings songs from the soundtrack of Let No Man Write My Epitaph. This album covers songs from the film Let No Man Write My Epitaph. It was well received by critics, and I think the opener on this record is incredible, but the following songs lack deviation from one another. The 3 tracks I'd recommend from it are Black Coffee, Angel Eyes, and My Melancholy Blues. In the next year of 1961, Ella Fitzgerald sings the Harold Arlen Songbook. This album was arranged, conducted, and co-written by Billy May. It is the 6th installment of her Songbook series, and the cover art was drawn by Henry Matisse. It's a terrific work across the board, and I think that Billy May's involvement helps significantly. The instrumentals and vocal affectations are especially crisp on this release. For such a lengthy pursuit, it's impressive how few of her songs feel like filler. The 3 tracks I recommend on it are Blues in the Night, Accentuate the Positive, and One More for My Baby, One More for the Road. In the same year of 1961, she released Clap Hands, Here Comes Charlie. This album was done with a quartet led by Lou Levy. The painting on the cover was made by Jean Dubuffet, and I think this album is perfect, and I'd strongly recommend it. It's actually one of the few albums I'd say is a must listen to throughout her catalog, and I would implore all of you to give it a listen. Ella nails every track on this. Gus Johnson kills on drums throughout, and Herb Ellis slays down some beautiful guitar lines. The production is to die for, and it's an absolute must listen for all jazz enjoyers. The 3 tracks I'd recommend off the record are Clap Hands, Here Comes Charlie, My Reverie, and A Night in Tunisia. The next year, 1962, Ella released Rhythm Is My Business. This album was recorded with a big band and conducted by Bill Doggett. It was well received by critics, and the record does a great job with song variety, but has somewhat of a wash production. The vocals are incredible, but the instrumental pieces were somewhat lacking. The 3 tracks I recommend for this are Show Me the Way, To Get Out of This World, because that's where everything is, Hallelujah, and I Love Him So, I'll Always Be in Love with You. In the same year of 1962, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Swings Brightly with Nelson. This album was created in collaboration with legendary producer Nelson Riddle. It's one of their 3 collaboration records, and the album won the Grammy for Best Vocal Performance, Female, giving Ella a total of 7 Grammys at this point. I really enjoy this album, and I think the track order makes a fantastic flow. The songs themselves are refreshing too. The production is amongst the best of her discography, and Ella's vocals are yet again terrific. The 3 tracks I'd recommend are I'm Gonna Go Fishin', Don't Be That Way, and I Won't Dance. In that same year of 1962, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Swings Gently with Nelson. This album was the second collaboration by Ella Fitzgerald and Nelson Riddle, released in 1962. Nelson Riddle once again stacked the orchestra for the record, and the consistency from song to song here is very good. There is also a well-selected arrangement of instrumentals employed. The 3 tracks I recommend from this release are Sweet and Slow, Street of Dreams, and It's a Pity to Say Goodnight. In the next year of 1963, Ella released Ella Sings Broadway. The orchestra on this record was arranged by Frank Duvall. It was a grand departure from Ella's typical works and orients around musical theater songs. I appreciate the shorter runtime on this project, despite many songs blending together. The 3 tracks I recommend from this are Steam Heat, No Other Love, and Warm All Over. In that same year of 1963, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Jerome Kern Songbook. This album was arranged and conducted also by Nelson Riddle, and it centers around songs composed by Jerome Kern. It was the 7th and penultimate album in Ella's Songbook series, and it was well received by critics. I think this is Riddle's least impressive showing as a producer on Ella's albums, and that overall the project is quite mediocre. The 3 tracks I'd recommend from it, however, are Let's Begin, Can't Help Lovin' That Man, and Why Was I Born? In the same year of 1963, Ella released Ella and Basie. This album was done by the Count Basie Orchestra, and the arrangement was done by Quincy Jones. It's their second album collaborating, and was ranked number 175 as the best album of all time by Pitchfork. This album is wonderful. The instrumentals are flavorful, and Ella's vocals are exuberant. Every song is perfect, and it's a must-listen jazz collaboration. It's another one of the albums I'd say are essential in her discography, and I'd implore all of you to check out. The 3 tracks I'd recommend from it are Deed I Do, Into Each Life Some Rain Must Fall, and Dream a Little Dream of Me. In the same year of 1963, she released These Are the Blues. This album features Ray Eldridge on trumpet and Wild Bill Davis on organ. The artwork was painted by David Stone Martin, and overall, I think it's a pretty flawless piece as well. Another record I'd say is essential in her discography for you guys to listen to. Every song is spectacular, and Norman Granz does a fantastic job producing here. Ella's vocals are so good in blues, I'd almost argue that they're better than jazz. However, I know that's a crazy take, and they are also fantastic in jazz, I know. But they're both iconic and great in their own ways. The 3 tracks I recommend from this are Jailhouse Blues, In the Evening, When the Sun Goes Down, and C.C. Rider. In the next year of 1964, Ella Fitzgerald released Hello, Dolly. This album is okay. I really enjoy the percussion used on it, but Ella's vocals are not on their best here. The instrumentals are also quite bland and the production is subpar. The 3 tracks I'd recommend from this are Miss Otis Regrets, Can't Buy Me Love, cover of the Beatles, and Hello, Dolly, the self-titled track. In that same year of 1964, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Johnny Mercer Songbook. This album is both the last of the Songbook series and the final collaboration Ella had with Nelson Riddle, on the Verve label at least. The piano is great on this, and the vocal affectations are executed very well. I do think the project lacks some variety, and the horns aren't incredible, but there's a really good solo on one of the tracks. The 3 songs I recommend off this record are Midnight Sun, When a Woman Loves a Man, and Laura. In the next year of 1965, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella at Duke's Place with Duke Ellington. This is another one of jazz's most famous collaboration albums, between, obviously, Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington. It's their second collab to date, and it was nominated for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance at the 1967 Grammys. Ella's harmonies on this are next level. It's incredibly well produced and honestly perfect all around. These 2 legends are in immaculate form here, and I think this is her strongest collaboration amongst her whole discography. It's a must listen, absolutely. In fact, if I had to choose one album from her whole discography to listen to, it would be this one. The 3 tracks to recommend from it are Azure, Passion Flower, and I Like the Sunrise. In the next year of 1966, Ella Fitzgerald released Whisper Not. This album was done in collaboration with Marty Paik Orchestra, and it's also her penultimate release on the Verve label. There are a lot of strong flashes here, whether it be beautiful vocals, peaceful piano, or great horn moments. However, with that, there's also a lot of slow, less attention-retaining work here, and it can make the listener somewhat exhausted because of such. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are Wives and Lovers, Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most, and Matchmaker, Matchmaker. In the following year of 1967, Ella Fitzgerald released Brighten the Corner. This was Ella's debut on Capitol Records, and it reached number 172 on Billboard Top 200 charts. Leaving Verve Records allowed Ella to explore some new themes that she couldn't as easily play into before, like religion, and she definitely utilizes that here. And unfortunately, I find it quite repetitive, to be honest, because she really beats the dead horse with this one. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are Just a Closer Walk with Thee, Brighten the Corner Where You Are, and I Need Thee Every Hour. In that same year of 1967, Ella Fitzgerald released her second Christmas album, Ella Fitzgerald's Christmas. This album is made up of only religious songs. It charted at number 27 on Billboard's holiday charts. Some of the songs are perfectly novel and interesting covers, while the others are near identical to their originals, a complaint you may remember I had with her previous Christmas release. The 3 songs I recommend from it are It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, Silent Night, and The First Noel. In the next year of 1968, Ella Fitzgerald released 30. This album consists of 6 medleys, conducted and arranged by Benny Carter. I think this album is phenomenal, featuring top-notch production and a sonorous, well-balanced orchestra. I see it as perfect, honestly, with not a second of wasted space. Every note hits beautifully. Definitely worth checking out. The 3 songs I recommend from it are My Mother's Eyes, 4 or 5 Times, and On Green Dolphin Street. In that same year of 1968, Ella released Misty Blue. This album features renditions of country music hits. It's really strong, with some blues elements and strong production employed again, as well as a novel and unique vocal approach. It's a very cool record. Very different. The 3 songs I recommend from it are Evil on Your Mind, This Gun Don't Care, and Don't Touch Me. In the next year of 1969, Ella released Ella. This was her first drop on Warner Bros. Records, and it's once again a call to action of covers. It was produced by Richard Perry, and it's overall incredible. She definitely makes the covers her own on this one in a sublime way. She really went at that criticism that I had for other records. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are Get Ready, The Hunter, and Yellow Man. In the next year of 1970, her first release of the 70s, Ella released Things Ain't the Way They Used to Be. This was Ella's final recording on Reprise Records, and I really enjoyed it. The instrumentals are very groovy, and the vocals are as jaw-dropping as ever. The first half is mildly inconsistent, but it's still a pleasant listen overall. The 3 tracks I'd recommend here are Sunny, Black Coffee, and I Heard It Through the Grapevine. 2 years later, in 1972, Ella Fitzgerald released Ella Loves Cole. This album was arranged by Nelson Riddle. It was her second album dedicated to Cole Porter, and overall it was kind of a mixed bag. Each part of the orchestra has their opportunity to shine here. Unfortunately, this also leads to some inconsistency. The 3 tracks I'd recommend from it are Without Love, Anything Goes, and Just One of Those Things. 2 years later, in 1974, Ella released Take Love Easy. This album was done in collaboration with Joe Pass. It was partly accompanied by a live release and was the first of 5 of their collaboration albums. The album is well done and every song is good, but the song arrangement track list is somewhat uneven. The 3 tracks I recommend from this are Take Love Easy, G Baby, Ain't I Good to You, and Once I Loved. In the next year of 1975, Ella released Ella and Oscar. Ella did this album in collaboration with Oscar Peterson and Ray Brown. I think this is one of the weaker releases from her catalog, with a lot of the songs running on. The 3 songs I recommend from it are Street of Dreams, Mean to Me, and Where Your Lover Has Gone. In the next year, she released Fitzgerald and Pass again. This is the second straight album Ella released featuring Joe Pass. It won her the 1977 Grammy Award for Best Vocal Jazz Album, and it was well received by critics. I really enjoyed the stripped-back instrumentals on this, with Pass's guitar and the minimized bass. It almost produces a lo-fi contemporary indie feel. Sadly, though, there is a 5-song span of near identical songs, which definitely stunt the album's flow. but it's still well done. The 3 tracks to recommend are I Ain't Got Nothing But the Blues, I Didn't Know About You, and Tennessee Waltz. 2 years later, in 1978, Ella released Lady Time. This album was interesting. It prominently used the organ, played by Jackie Davis, and is somewhat repetitive, but it still features some good songs. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are I'm Walking, I'm in the Mood for Love, and I've Never Had a Chance. The next year, in 1979, Ella released Fine and Mellow. This album was recorded 5 years prior to its release. It won the Grammy for Best Vocal Jazz Album, Ella's second win in 4 years, and a reviewer at the time called it Ella's best album in years. It's definitely my favorite of her 70s works. It's truly phenomenal. A few knockout songs on here for sure. 3 tracks I'd recommend from it are Fine and Mellow, I'm Just a Lady So, and Round Midnight. In that same year of 1979, Ella released A Classy Pair. This album was done in collaboration with Count Basie. Reviewers were somewhat polarized reporting on this record, as they believed Count Basie's orchestra was restricted by Benny Carter. I think it makes the album interesting. The songs are longer here, with more build-up, which partly made the album feel a little bit more drawn out, but it also makes it more epic. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are Teach Me Tonight, Organ Grinder Swing, and Sweet Lorraine. 2 years later, in 1981, Ella released her first album of the 80s, Ella Abraca Jobim. This album is cover songs of fellow jazz virtuoso Antonio Carlos Jobim. Despite the title stating the word Songbook, this actually isn't really counted in her Songbook series. It was her first recording fully done in the bossa nova style. And despite not actually working with Jobim, she appeared on a TV special with him and Frank Sinatra. Overall, this album is quite strong, despite some interesting mixing choices. The instruments on this sound great, and Ella presents some nice variety orally. The 3 tracks I recommend off it are Water to Drink, Triste, and He's a Karaoke. In the next year of 1982, Ella released The Best Is Yet to Come. This album was yet another record orchestrated by Nelson Riddle, the final collaboration between the pair. The end of a 15-year partnership. Fitzgerald won a Grammy for the work, and this release features some great tracks, but its momentum hurt by a few songs consisting of nearly identical song structure, though it has some fantastic singing and instrumentals. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are Deep Purple, Somewhere in the Night, and You're Driving Me Crazy. In the next year, 1983, Ella released Speak Love. This album was done in collaboration with Joe Pass. It's their 3rd release together. The album's title refers to the first song on the album, referencing a quotation from Much Ado About Nothing. Critics praised the album despite noting that Ella's vocal range was becoming more limited. To be honest, I also noticed this on this release, but Joe Pass goes hard on guitar here, and even with the general vocal decline, there are still a few performances where she steps up to her former peaks. The 3 tracks I'd recommend are Girl Talk, Georgia on My Mind, and Speak Low. In that same year of 1983, Ella released Nice Work If You Can Get It. This album was done in collaboration with Andre Previn and double bassist Niels Orsted Peterson. It's Fitzgerald's final release with predominantly jazz piano. The album's cover is a caricature of Ella Fitzgerald, Andre Previn, and the Gershwin brothers done by Bonnie Green. Most of the weight on this album is lifted by Andre Previn, which I think, despite his masterful skill and capabilities, is a little bit of a mistake. Because I believe Ella has more to offer here, even with her regressing vocals. The 3 tracks on it I'd recommend are Let's Call the Whole Thing Off, Who Cares, and They Can't Take That Away From Me. 3 years later, Ella released her penultimate studio release, Easy Living, in 1986. This is yet another collaboration album with Joe Pass. Fitzgerald was nominated for Best Female Jazz Vocal for her work on this album. and this was their final release together, marking the end of a 13-year intermittent partnership. The reviews were similar to her last release with Pass, targeting her fading vocals, but commending her charm and delivery. I thought this album was quite good, and Pass pulls a lot of weight yet again, but it's still a very enjoyable listen. The 3 tracks I'd recommend are Love for Sale, Moonlight in Vermont, and On Green Dolphins. 4 years later, in 1990, Ella Fitzgerald released her final studio album, All That Jazz. She won the Grammy on this album for Best Female Jazz Vocal, which is so impressive, and critics widely acknowledge her deteriorated vocals, but they credit her rhythmic acuity. I thought it was a nice release with a bunch of good but not great songs that are still very well done. The 3 tracks I recommend from it are My Last Affair, When Your Lover Has Gone, and That Old Devil Called Love. Ella gave her last performance in 1993. She struggled with diabetes her whole life and had several hospital trips because of this condition. In 1993, both her legs were amputated because of her condition. She passed away 3 years later in 1996 due to a stroke, and she was buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery. Rest in peace to a legend. Ella went through a lot of adversity throughout her life for sure. One aspect of adversity that I had not previously touched upon yet is some of the racial discrimination she faced. Now, throughout her life, she had some help from a few individuals to get past this, such as Dizzy Gillespie and, surprisingly, Marilyn Monroe on some instances, that she thanked a lot, and it was totally wrong that she had to go through that. She influenced a wide amount of artists, even artists outside the jazz realm, transcending that genre, like Bjork and SZA even, and she'll always be beloved for her impact on jazz. She will never be forgotten. In 2022, Rolling Stone ranked Ella Fitzgerald as number 45 on the 200 greatest singers of all time. Something I felt like she should have been higher on. And really, I've had a fantastic time, and I've learned a lot from listening through her whole discography and researching her. She was really an amazing person, it seems, and there are very few bad accounts, if any. I really respect Ella Fitzgerald, and I'm sure many of you guys also do if you're watching this. Now, I thank you all for listening if you stayed till the end. Once again, I'd like to harken back to the beginning and say, if you do want to check out some of her music and you don't really know where to start, I did make the playlist that I will attach the link to in the description, and I'll probably put in the comments too, because sometimes YouTube can be weird with that. And you're welcome to check that out. It's on Spotify only, unfortunately, because I don't use any other streaming platforms generally. Yeah, thank you for listening if you stayed here. If you want to check out more, I have a bunch of shorts that cover Ella Fitzgerald stuff. Also, a few other artists I've covered stuff. And I also have 5 other artist overviews, some of them being almost as lengthy as this, and some of them lasting even longer, that you are welcome to check out. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you have a great day, and have a good one.